It's Sunday, January 10th, and I wish you all welcome to a new edition, our first this year, of DocTV International. Today, there's not much wonder what we're going to talk about, and I'll start right away with introducing our regular contributor, our correspondent in New York, Mr. Charles Ortel. Welcome.
Thanks for having me on. Very good, thank you.
Very good to see you, Charles. I told you that it's not exactly easy to decipher what's going on. And despite the fact that you and Jason had a walk in the park on Wednesday, it didn't turn out that way, did it? How many people do you think were there to start with?
Well, it's interesting. When I got up in the morning, I was watching the mainstream media, NBC News, and they estimated with great seriousness that only 5,000 disgruntled Trump supporters were there. I'm not good at estimating crowd size, but that's the largest crowd I've ever seen in my life. Certainly in the hundreds of thousands. Some are saying as many as 2 million. It was a large crowd.
And how was the atmosphere, to start with that? I mean, you got on well with the audience, didn't you?
Yeah, Jason and I have done quite a few of these. We've never been to a Trump rally, but we've been to many Black Lives Matter rallies in and around New York City. To contrast, in those Black Lives Matter rallies, you would have people with a megaphone stirring up the crowd, talking, the people standing at the stage, people now supported by Nike and other large advertisers standing up and saying, I'm running for Congress not to change America, but to destroy America. That's a direct quote from a candidate in Columbus Circle. We were there, Jason and I, and it's on our videotape. These were loving people. It was a spirit. We walked all the way from our hotel, which is near the White House, all the way to the Ellipse, which is where the president spoke, and then up to the Washington Monument, all the way to the Capitol. We encountered many, many people in American flags, different type of American flags, husband and wives, grandparents, grandchildren, families. That was the overwhelming majority of people. They were respectful, they were kind, they were fired up, they are patriots. They believe in the Constitution. They expect our representatives, senators, and elected officials to uphold the Constitution, including our Bill of Rights, the right to peacefully assemble, the right of freedom of speech. By the time we got to the Capitol, we began to notice more and more younger people, athletic people with backpacks, the kind of people we had seen at other rallies, BLM rallies, who were Antifa people in our view. And the large majority of the people standing at the Capitol arrived to find that there were no police, as we did. There were no police blocking your entrance, no vehicles, no checkpoints, no fence, no nothing. And so these people streamed onto the grounds of the Capitol. In contrast, you'll see, if you look today at the way it looks now, there's an 8-foot-high concrete fence around the Capitol right now, which is customary around the time of inauguration. They have enormous barriers to make sure that people don't swarm into the inauguration. None of that was there. There was no blocking people. Indeed, people were encouraged to flood on. And, you know, the mass of the people we saw were older people. They were not in great shape, many of them. They were overweight. And suddenly, as we were watching, we began to see young people scale a very high scaffolding, which is not an easy thing to do. I mean, you have to be in pretty good shape to scale up maybe 50, 60 feet. And again, the police did not stop them from doing that. Masses of them came up, and we didn't shoot the video, but other people have shot the video of basically the doors being opened to the Capitol by the police who should have been guarding it and welcoming these young people in. So rather than rushing to the conclusion that Donald Trump personally orchestrated a rebellion, a seditious act, I think we should catch our breaths here. And we should have learned from the many staged events in the past. If you go back to, say, Maidan Square, or there have been many, many staged events through the Arab Spring and at other times inside and outside America. Let's catch our breaths. Let's understand who breached the Capitol. Let's look at the number of people who did that as a percentage of the actual number of people who attended the rally. It was a tiny percentage. And you cannot hold Donald Trump responsible for the actions of people who may have done something of their own free will, on their own accord, and who may very well not be Trump supporters.
Did you hear President Trump's speech yourself?
Well, it was tough to do. We did hear the sound was not very good, actually, when we were out there. We did hear him say, come with me, walk with me over to the Capitol. But I think it was what he was trying to do was to have the visual of the large number of Trump supporters standing in the cold. And it was cold. Washington, D.C. is generally not that cold. It was cold. It was
minus degrees?
Sorry?
Did you have minus degrees? Or was it still above 32 Fahrenheit?
Yeah, it was just above, probably about 35, 36, but it was windy. And it's just like, it was probably a typical Norwegian summer.
Yeah. Well,
but it was.
I want to go back to, and if you or Jason have a chance, we're recording this, no beating around the bush about that, but if you or Jason could point us to that candidate who actually stood up and said, I stand for election, not to change, but to destroy America. Friday's broadcast, ours, DocTV, was titled Purge. And actually, we used that title because Friday morning, Hans, our editor, got a call from the Secretary General of the Norwegian Journalists, or the Norwegian Editors Association, that he would personally, Secretary General, would write a letter to the board of this association to have their view on whether Hans and Document had been in violation of their own statutes. In other words, whether it was what Hans and Document has been saying about the election being stolen was incitement, whether it was within the limits of free expression, which was compatible with the standards of the Norwegian editors. So that's why we titled our show The Purge.
Right.
You know what happened? And I want to, not only for you, but for our viewers. What happened was that yesterday's broadcast, Friday's broadcast, was the most watched within the first 24 hours of any of the broadcasts we've had so far since we started in September. And donations are piling in, and a lot of new viewers, after having seen what happened to us, the letter from the Editors Association, and what was starting then to unfold in the United States with big tech, Twitter, or Trump being banned from Twitter, etc., etc. People react. So let me go back to you now, Charles. What is happening? I mean, there's been a lot of there's things happening every hour. So I mean, where do we stand right now?
Well, I don't know Norwegian law, but I think I understand the reasoning behind the First Amendment in this country. And it really owes its origin to Thomas Jefferson's drafting of the statute protecting religious liberty, which was before the Declaration of Independence, July 4, 1776. At that time, the treatment that Galileo got and that other prominent critics have gotten who expressed discordant opinions or opinions that were at variance from the status quo or the hierarchy, that treatment, that persecution for ideas that were basically proven to be correct, was the rationale that the speech that needs to be protected is not the status quo groupthink speech, it's the controversial speech. Because very often mass humanity drives itself off over a cliff thinking that what they're doing is correct, when in fact they've missed the essence of truth. And so what Jefferson wanted was to encourage a marketplace of ideas where if you have a controversial thought, let somebody stand up and criticize. Let somebody explain why you're wrong. Encourage that kind of debate. Don't go into a zone where faceless, scruffy technocrats out in Silicon Valley can decide that the President of the United States does not have the freedom to express himself on a platform. I think in this country, it may take a while, given that Biden is likely going to be the president. We're heading rapidly toward a place where freedom of speech will be redefined by the Supreme Court, one way or another, by cases that will reach the Supreme Court. What big tech is doing now is outrageous. And what governments are doing around the world in line with big tech is outrageous. The mass of humanity will not stand for it.
I do agree with you, of course. And Wednesday evening, Norwegian time, when you guys were outside the Capitol, I was listening to Norwegian news, to the Norwegian state broadcaster. And they had analysts, correspondents, big-time politicians on their live broadcast saying that what is happening here is that Trump has committed a coup. He's a coup maker. Now, Hans and I discussed that the following day, pointing out that what kind of inflammatory language is this? We all know what most civilized countries do with coup makers. And we certainly know that the United States, federal or state level, do have a death sentence. Making a coup is tantamount to treason. It is treason. And what do you do with traitors? You kill them, you hang them. Now, of course, this happened here, but I gather that the coup language was also used in American MSM, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, people are way over the top. I mean, I think we need to, as I say, catch our breath and go back over the history here. For 4 years, at least, Donald Trump has been falsely accused, knowingly and falsely accused, of having been a Russian agent by many people, by Obama, by when he was still president, and we now know by Pelosi, by Schumer, by prominent Democrats. They have wasted 4 years of everyone's time claiming that Donald Trump, claiming falsely and knowingly that he was a Russian agent. When the Mueller report did not help their case, they then launched a Ukrainian impeachment hoax, which he was not convicted over. So these people are very fond of making false allegations, of lathering up the mainstream media, which they control, lathering up the punditry, the academicians, the equivalent of your Norwegian media regulators, and encouraging the globalists to believe that their lies are truth. That's what we've been enduring for 4 long years. And when it came time during the campaign to investigate whether, in fact, Hunter Biden had anything on his laptop that might prove that Joe Biden was possibly, and his family, were in the employ of the Chinese communists, that's treason. If that's true, that is definitely treason. That's highly illegal. There's a lot of evidence. Steve Bannon, until recently having been banned on YouTube, constantly referred to his having, quote, the receipts, the proof that Joe Biden and his family are corruptly under the thrall of the Chinese Communist Party. It would seem to me if we had a real media around the world, somebody would be saying, hang on, let's take a look at that laptop. Let's see if it's legitimate. Why isn't the FBI looking at it? Why didn't the FBI complete its investigation into Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation? So there are lots of big questions here that the media refuses to answer, while at the same time jumping to the conclusion in less than 24 hours, or approximately 24 hours, that Donald Trump should be impeached again. What the Democrats are missing here is that 75 million people at minimum voted for Donald Trump at a country where there are 335 million total people. I don't know how many children there are. Let's say there are 100 million who couldn't vote. Now, that's a big percentage of the eligible voting population is now never going to support Joe Biden under any circumstances. And, I don't want violence in my country, but what the Democrats are doing, what Pelosi, Schumer, and those who support this impeachment cause and this purge, they are inciting a possible insurrection here. They're inciting violence by what they're doing at a time when they should be trying to heal.
Just like the candidate you referred to earlier, who said he would stand for election to destroy America. Do you think sorry? Okay,
Okay.
do you think? Okay, we have to be careful with gender talk now. It probably was neutral. What I'm saying, or what I'm asking rather, do you feel convinced that the Russia collusion story, also referred to as Obamagate by us, the Ukrainian hoax, as you referred to, impeachment hoax, and the demonstrations at Capitol Hill with the more than likely infiltration of Antifa, with the gesturing welcome in, guys, was that all pieces of an evil master plan, so to speak? Was it all, parts of the same puzzle leading to the total destruction of Trump and his legacy?
Well, I think it's actually worse than that. If we go back, there's a great book by an historian called Paul Kengor, Kengor, called Dupes. And I commend it to the reading of your audience, your audience reading it.
We'll put up the link.
And what it explains is the idea of totalitarian control over society, or total control over society. That's an old idea. I mean, there's been a battle between freedom-loving people and people who want to tell you how to live your life, absolutists who want to tell you exactly the right way to live. That's a long-standing struggle. Until recently in our country, we were free. But what has happened in our country and around the world in this drive towards unregulated globalism, the people who benefit from unregulated globalism have been able to basically put a stranglehold on the population. It won't be, we know, for example, of a candidate, Laura Loomer, who was highly controversial. She was not supported by Republicans. She won the Republican primary, and then she simultaneously lost her bank account, lost all of her social media. She had no way to get a job. I mean, in an instant, if they want to cut
silenced. She was silenced.
Yeah, well, because the big credit card companies, there are very few of them. Because the big banks in our country, there are very few of them. The next step, I fear, is to move, and I know Norway's doing this, to move to a cashless society. Because when you do that, then suddenly the credit card companies, big tech, and the security services, they know everything about you, everything you buy, everything you own, and they have the ability, as has happened to a colleague of ours in Sweden, to just cause you to be unemployable, cause you to be investigated nonstop, cause you to be a miserable wreck. And that's before we get to the idea that in the rich countries, people are getting older, they need health care. How long will it be before health care is rationed? People look you up and say, oh, you're a Trump supporter. I guess we won't give you that operation. Or we'll put you have, let's say, you could save yourself in 6 months, but we'll put you on a waiting list, and it'll take you maybe 9 months. If you're lucky, you can have your operation, but you might be dead by then. I mean, that's where we're headed.
So in other words, the words that they uttered about Trump on Wednesday night, on Thursday, that he was a coup maker, goes back to themselves. It goes back to the big tech, the MSM, and the deep state, and the oligarchs of the world at Wall Street or in the banks. They are the real coup makers. Are we now into the era of the new Great Reset, as there's been so much talk about?
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about, I believe, is a term that is used around the world. It's called gaslighting. You accuse somebody of doing exactly what you, in fact, are doing. And then the mainstream media runs with it. So if we look back, if the person who had been president for the last 4 years were not named Donald Trump, then that person would have gotten the Nobel Peace Prize just for one of these agreements between Israel and the UAE, just for one of them, let alone the number that are in process, that have happened and are in process. For that alone, if the person had been Barack Obama, say, and the economic record of creating much higher incomes for African Americans, for Hispanic, for women, for Asians, for having the kind of employment numbers and unemployment numbers that he produced from a difficult standing start, that person would have won a Nobel Prize in economics. The accomplishments of this president are a direct threat to the elite few who want to have unregulated globalism. The Davos men and women, World Economic Forum, who believe that they're smart enough to run the entire world when there's no part of this country on the planet, no government on this planet that's doing a good job fostering freedom, fostering environments for families, creating economic opportunity, trimming down bureaucracy, bringing the benefits of advancing technology, which we see in the private sector, to the bureaucracies. No, these are stifling national, regional, international bureaucracies who live above the rules that we must obey. Many of them, the international organizations, pay no national taxes. They fly around first class. They go to fancy meals and parties. They put their families on the payroll. That's the life they want for themselves. And they want us to be miserable. They want us to need government. It's a diabolical place we're in, and we're going to stay this way so long as good men and women around the world meekly stay at home and meekly follow the dictates of people who fundamentally don't seem to know what they're doing and don't hold our best interests at heart.
In Thursday's broadcast, we included, it was named Word, which in Norwegian might be both singular and plural. And we inserted a small list, bullet point list from factcheck.org, which is, as far as I know, a mainstream media outlet as good as anyone. And it was published on January 20th, 2019, and it listed many of the achievements of President Trump that you were referring to. But then we all know what happened. In came the China virus. Let me ask you a question that a lot of people, friends and family and supporters, subscribers ask me, was this also a part of the plan, or did the elites just grab this and use it for all it's worth? What is your take on that, Charles?
Well, the hijacking of a global health risk to create more global bureaucracy is an old tactic. It was used with HIV and AIDS. And I'm not saying that HIV and AIDS are not a threat. Of course they're a threat. But what I'm saying, if you go back into the history of the way in which the Global Fund for AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria was created, it was created in the aftermath of George W. Bush, the Supreme Court decision which made him president, the fury against that. It was formed shortly in January of 2002, but an announcement that it was going to happen, I think, occurred in April of 2001. And immediately, billions of dollars went to fight HIV and AIDS through the World Health Organization, which is basically out of control and currently under the control of a person from Ethiopia whose background needs to be fully investigated. That person, my look at it, just through publicly available sources, is an avowed communist, is not a medical doctor, has a horrible record in his own country, stoking violence, and is very close to the Chinese Communist Party. So somebody who is not doing a particularly good job with, let's say, executing world health policies in his own country, in Ethiopia, has no business dictating to the United States and around the world that we ought to shut down our economies, as we have done since March of 2020. I mean, that decision, I fault Trump for that, actually, that he stood by and said, wait, we're not going to shut down the largest economy in the world because some bureaucrat is relying on a model that may or may not be correct. Let's study this. Let's see what's going on. Let's block entrance to our country, but let's keep our country going, is what he should have done. The statistics on COVID, on the number of actual cases and on other people who died, not with COVID, but from COVID, the statistics are horribly wrong. They're inconsistent. They're biased for many reasons. And, this whole situation that we're in has certainly helped China, has certainly hurt the United States, and has certainly hurt not only Donald Trump's political fortune and some personal fortunes, but think of the children. Think of the impressionable children that we all have kids, and in the crucial times in their lives when they're 12 or 13, when they're 17, their teenage years, locking kids away, locking young kids so they can't go out and play without a mask, the impact on their mental development, the impact on people who are prone to depression anyway, none of this has been taken into account. And indeed, when people pressed Bill Gates' wife, Melinda Gates, on, what did she think in hindsight it was such a good idea to rush towards this lockdown? She said, well, actually, at the time we recommended it, we hadn't considered the economic consequences. I mean, what kind of an idiot would say it's a good idea to just to make sure that the virus doesn't spread, why don't we shut down the world economy? What's going to come next? The statistics say that 75% of the people who get COVID in the United States are getting it from being indoors. Is the solution now in the winter that everybody should live outside? I mean, because we're eating outside. Every Saturday, I and my brother go out, we eat outside. It's January. It's cold here. That can't be a smart idea.
I'm sure you're familiar with the Great Barrington Declaration, Charles, and I'll just use this opportunity to let other new viewers of our program have a look at the Great Barrington Declaration, in which three of the world's foremost virologists warns against the dangers of the lockdown policy. And they're pretty clear in saying that lockdown will create more harm than the virus itself.
Exactly. I mean, the basic principle, I'm not a medical person and I'm not a technical person, and I have had in my family to deal with difficult health emergencies. And what you learn when you do that is that even the best doctors in the world, or the best doctors in America, can be stumped when it comes to dealing with the particulars of a single patient. In the case of my ex-wife, we were told she has this type of cancer, so this type of treatment is required. It didn't work. So, oh, wait a minute, we got that wrong. It's a 180-degree different type of cancer, and it's a different treatment. So if you can't know the true course for one patient, how does somebody who's never been a line physician, that's Dr. Fauci or Dr. Birx, how do they get off, or Dr. Tedros is not even a medical person, medical doctor, how do they get off telling 7.4 billion people how to live their lives 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? It's ridiculous. And one of the problems I think we have with the World Health Organization is that it's yet another wasteful bureaucracy that is taking time away from the line physicians, and more important, the nurses who should be treating those who need care. We have erected a gigantic bureaucracy of meddlers who get rich off the bureaucracy, the patents, their investments, their families, and there's no regulation. If Dr. Fauci says jump, you say how high. That's the way.
Two things here, Charles. First of all, back to what you said about the bureaucracy. Now, I worked with the UN in various disasters and emergencies, and in an African country I won't name here, I shared the premises with WHO. And I actually became a whistleblower in my own, it was in UNICEF, I worked for UNICEF. And I told UNICEF in a report, which also went to the Norwegian Minister of Foreign Affairs, that there's massive corruption going on, not only in UNICEF, but also in WHO. Mid-level leaders of foreigners and not foreigners are receiving subs, and thousands of dollars, which is a huge amount in any African country, for Christmas, for New Year, thanks to good service. I mean, the bureaucracy, the UN bureaucracy is so greased. I'm not saying that all UN bureaucrats are corrupt. Don't misunderstand me right. I'm saying that there is so much corruption and greasing in that system that the bureaucracy is unable to deal with what they're supposed to deal with from the beginning.
Well, I'd actually take it a step further, and I would commend to your viewers I know it's probably going to get people excited, but there's something called the CIA World Handbook, and it's available online. And it may or may not be accurate, but one thing it does do is it gives you granular information on every major country in the world, almost 200 countries in the world. And it gives you details that I think are much more interesting than gross domestic product. For example, miles of paved road, number of hospital beds, number of doctors, transportation system, the percentage of the country that has access to electricity. And you start looking at this and you realize that, I'll pick a country, Democratic Republic of the Congo is a gigantic country, many times the size of Norway. And it has, as far as I can tell, few, if any, paved roads. The vast swaths of the country have no electricity. It has no clean water, no sanitation, no doctors, no hospitals, no nurses. How, and a gigantic population. I think it approaches 100 million people. So how in the hell is some Geneva-based organization going to get inside the Congo and figure out where the medicine is actually going, or the drugs are actually going, that the WHO and others pay for? You can't. There are no granular audits of what's going on. Another thing that's very different in the African countries, as you know, is in many of them, they're not yet packed into cities. People are scattered to the wind in places where it's just frankly difficult and dangerous to get to. So it is highly likely that money that is sent into these countries is skived off its source. We know in Tanzania, for example, that the central bank and the senior members years ago were stealing grant money right off the top before it even made an attempt to get into the hinterland to do whatever good it was supposed to do. So, I look, if you want to say to me that we ought to support an organization headquartered in the Congo with volunteers, good meaning, living for 5-10 years apiece in the Congo, that was going to build out the road system, bring electricity to Congo, and stay there, and you'd have the ability to check and see, look at the receipts to make sure that your Norwegian kroner and my US dollars were actually going to the needy and not to the bureaucrats. I'm all for that. But when you set up a global scheme in the most expensive living place in America, one of them, Geneva, and these bureaucrats are not out in the bush. They're in fancy apartments. They're not flying coach or taking boats or walking down to the Congo. They're flying first class and going to conferences at other fancy capitals around the world, virtue signaling and bragging about all the good, while no one's checking to see what happened to the money. It's disgusting.
Absolutely disgusting. Back to the doctors for 1 second to point two. I mean, it's a rule of thumb for anyone who has a disease or a problem, and in any, it doesn't have to be a civilized country. You don't have to go to the West. In Iraq, for instance, I had many people come to me and said, and they didn't have a public health system working in Iraq. So it was always a question about always get a second opinion.
Right.
But when it comes to COVID, no second opinion. When it comes to Trump, when it comes to deep state and the elite who are actually undercutting and destroying American democracy, there's no second opinion. Silence.
Well, and what's particularly ironic is that under the first African-American president, Barack Obama, slavery around the world flourished. It flourished. And had I been, I'm obviously not African-American, but had I been the first African-American president, that would have been a unifying theme to stand up and say, America today still suffers the legacy of slavery. We are going to eradicate slavery around the world. And by slavery, I don't only mean physical ownership of somebody, but conditions such as do exist for minorities in China, where minorities are effectively enslaved, where goods sourced to places in the United States and Norway are basically manufactured by slaves. Why is the left around the world rushing into the embrace of the Chinese Communist Party, and at the same time cascade England and America and other nations that engaged in the slave trade? It makes no sense. And on the college campuses around the world, or as Rush Limbaugh likes to call them, the campi, the professors who walk around in those stupid wool hats with the scraggy beards, spouting Marxist nonsense, need to look in the mirror and say, why are we allowing our students to embrace Marxism, to embrace totalitarianism and communism and the dangers, the terrors of that system, while at the same time knocking down the sacrifices of people who founded our country and other countries. When our founders got together and faced down the king of Britain, they weren't facing down a little tiny king. That was a powerful country. And the penalty back then for criticizing the king was not merely that you would die a horrible death, but your children, your heirs, would not be able to inherit property or own property. It was a brave thing they did. And their example unleashed around the world a thirst for liberty that is now, liberty is under the boot of big tech right now. And unless people decouple from these platforms, find alternatives, speak up peacefully, we could enter, as Joe Biden himself prophesies, dark days ahead, many dark days, if not dark years. This is a time of testing.
It is a time of testing indeed, Charles. I don't think the quench for, or the thirst for liberty has diminished over the years, even though populations, particularly in Norway, where we've been living off our oil wealth affluently and well, not a problem on the horizon. We've been too affluent. We've been complacent as to what's happening outside our own doors and own windows. But I still believe that the new reset might, of the elites of the world, might also represent a new awakening. And I don't know what you think about that. Am I totally off the mark here, or?
Well, we see the problem here is the famous phrase. It's attributed to Mark Twain, but actually I think it came in the 1600s, possibly earlier, that a lie can travel halfway around the earth before the truth has the chance to catch up. And we're talking about a May meeting of the World Economic Forum in another expensive place, Singapore, where by May, with high confidence, I'm not a seer, but with high confidence, I can tell you, we will have a stock market, a capital markets crisis before May. And in that crisis, as happened at 9/11, never let a good crisis go to waste, Klaus Schwab and the globalists will be there to say, actually, the world has too much debt. We need to sacrifice. We need to cancel this debt. And this is what the Great Reset plans. And in exchange for canceling that debt, we're also going to take away your assets and give you a guaranteed income and tell you how to live. I mean, they're trying to drive us towards total control by the few, extinguishment of our rights. And Thomas Jefferson also predicted in the only book that he ever wrote, Notes on the Present State of Virginia, or on the State of Virginia, that our rights will expire or revive in a convulsion. He wrote those words in 1782. Others may have written similar stuff, but he was the author of the Declaration of Independence. He foresaw this. We are in the middle of a global convulsion whose reverberations we have not yet felt in full. And I expect, the ups and downs to widen. And I believe that the future, it could be two very different and stark realities. It could be a crushing lockdown and loss of liberty, or alternatively, after a struggle, it could be a revival of the rights that we all cherish and hold dear.
Let's hope for the latter, Charles. It was a great pleasure talking to you. Through friends, we've been given an offer to subtitle our Norwegian broadcast of Friday into English. So we might add a dubbed version, not a dubbed version, a texted version of our last ordinary broadcast of this week to the end of this interview with you. And
Great.
Next week, I hope to have you back here. And I'll do my utmost to get some of my contacts in Africa on the line too, because I think they have a lot of interesting news as well. Let's keep our horizons and eyes open, horizons wide and eyes open. Look forward to seeing you next Sunday again, Charles. Have a great week. Thank you.
All right, you too.
Okay, it was a long broadcast today, but you deserve it. We deserve it because there's so much going on, and the more people that get out into the open and tune into broadcasters, sites like ours to find the true news, get yourself disentangled from the mainstream media, MSM, and support broadcasters and servers in the service of truth and liberty. You may support us, make international donations. I think there will be a poster at the end of this broadcast telling you how you can support us from abroad. We might open up an account with Patreon. Anyway, we're not going to be silenced, and we see you next Sunday. Welcome back.